My Thomas Story Library, Oliver. This is a story about Oliver the Great Western Engine. His owner didn't want him anymore and he was going to be turned into scrap until someone came to the rescue. One day, Edward was talking to Douglas. They had heard that steam engines were being put out of service across the island and replaced by new diesel engines. "They're being turned into scrap," said Edward quietly. "Don't mention that word," Douglas gasped. "It makes my wheels wobble." "I agree," replied Edward, "but the Fat Controller says he will make sure there are always steam engines on his railway." "I'm glad we work for the Fat Controller," smiled Douglas. That night, Douglas was still working. He had taken the midnight goods train to a station at a faraway part of the island where only the diesels worked. He was just shunting ready for his return journey when he heard a faint hiss. "That sounds like a steam engine," he thought in surprise. The hiss came again. "Who's there?" asked Douglas. "I'm Oliver," whispered a voice. "Are you one of the Fat Controller's engines?" "Aye, and proud of it," replied Douglas. "Thank goodness," said the voice. In the darkness, Douglas could just make out a little Western engine. This is my coach Isabel and brake van Toad," said the engine. "We've run out of coal, and I have no more steam." "But what are you doing here?" asked Douglas. "Escaping from the scrapyard," replied Oliver, trembling. Douglas shivered. "I'll be glad to help you," he said. "We'll make it look like as though you're ready for scrap, and I'm taking you away." The driver and fireman agreed to help too. Everyone worked fast. They took up Oliver's side rods, wrote out transit labels saying that he belonged to the Fat Controller, and chalked scrap all over him. "No time for me to turn around," panted Douglas. "I will have to run backwards." Douglas and Oliver started out on their journey. But before they could leave the station, they were stopped. "Aha!" exclaimed the foreman, shining his torch at Oliver. "A Great Western engine!" His light flickered further back. "With a Western coach and a brake van. You can't take these." "But they're all for us. See for yourself," exclaimed Douglas's driver. Douglas's driver showed him the transit labels. Oliver and Douglas hardly dared to breathe. The foreman looked all over Oliver. "Seems in order. You can go, driver," he said. "Phew! That was a near thing," puffed Douglas. "We've had worse," smiled Oliver. "We were nearly caught getting here and had to hide on an old quarry branch for 3 days. I was very frightened." "I'm not surprised," replied Douglas. And they forged ahead. It was daylight when their journey ended. "We're home!" cried Douglas as they reached the Fat Controller's railway. "I know just the place for you." And he showed them an empty siding, nicely hidden away. "Goodbye and thank you," whispered Oliver. "I was happy to help," smiled Douglas, and he puffed away. Back at the shed, Douglas told the other engines all about Oliver. They were very excited and agreed that something must be done for him. "The Fat Controller will have to know," said James. "Douglas should tell him at once," added Gordon firmly. "Well, here I am," said a cheerful voice. "Now what's all this about?" It was the Fat Controller. The engines were silent. "Beg your pardon, sir, but we do need another engine," said Duck quietly at last. "Yes, sir, a steam engine, sir," said Gordon. "We do indeed," replied the Fat Controller. "But I'm afraid that unless one is saved from scrap, there's little hope." "But, sir," burst out Douglas, "one has been." "Who told you that, Douglas?" asked the Fat Controller. The engines looked nervously at each other. Sir, he saved him, muttered Douglas. You saved a steam engine? Exclaimed the Fat Controller. I want to hear everything. So Douglas told him all about how he had rescued Oliver, Isabel, and Toad from the scrapyard. When he had finished, the Fat Controller smiled. I'm proud of you, Douglas, he said. Oliver, Isabel, and Toad are just what we need for Duck Sprankline. Thank you, sir, replied Douglas, and all the engines cheered. The Fat Controller soon had Oliver, Isabel, and Toad mended and painted in full Great Western colours. They are very happy on Duck's Branch Line. As Oliver puffs along the coast, he often thinks about what a lucky escape he had. If Douglas hadn't come to the rescue, things would be very different. Oliver is very grateful to Douglas and everyone at the Fat Controller's Railway for his lovely new home.